Chapter 27. Edwin's great shock. Julia lost her composure when she saw the headmaster's name flash across her phone. Her hands trembled as she answered, only for the most unexpected sentence to enter her ears. "Give the phone to Godfrey." "Oh, okay, sir." She turned to the furious boy seated upright on the sickbed and stretched the phone toward him. Godfrey raised an eyebrow, suspicion flickering in his ocean blue eyes. "What?" "The headmaster wants to speak with you." Godfrey hesitated for only a second before taking the phone. "I am speaking to Godfrey Daniels, correct?" Sebastian's deep, steady voice carried through the speaker. "Yes," Godfrey answered curtly. "Your case has just been brought to my table," Sebastian continued, his tone calm yet carrying authority. "I have decided that Dale and his associates will be suspended for 2 weeks. This will deny them access to the upcoming field trip. Are you satisfied with this outcome?" "Make it 3 weeks." The demand left Julia blinking and Edwin bursting into laughter. To him, this brat had been handed a gift on a silver platter, and instead of being grateful, he dared to make demands. Surely, he would lose everything. Of course, Sebastian's calm response silenced the laughter instantly. "Some students would want them gone for months, but you only added a week. You're a good kid." Edwin's mind stalled, his thoughts crashing into one another. What? Most students of Manhattan came from powerful, influential families. Why was the headmaster risking so much to provoke them, all for one boy who wasn't even worth a fraction of their total potential? The combat instructor, who had fought on Godfrey's behalf, didn't know whether to laugh or cry. A 3-week suspension. That meant Dale, Siegfried, Orwin and Maldred wouldn't just miss the field trip. They would bear that mark even after returning. Julia's wide eyes darted to Godfrey. The boy's expression brightened for the first time. Meanwhile, inside the headmaster's office, Edwin cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, I don't understand. If these students don't attend the field trip, it will weaken the average strength of the sophomore elites. All we'll have left is Isolde, Snow, and Cecil." "Haven't you seen Godfrey's new summon? It has top-level high-tier potential," Evangeline replied before Sebastian could speak. She stood at the headmaster's side, her voice quiet but confident. Edwin scoffed. "Golems have no future. Other summons learn and adapt with each experience. Golems have no intelligence. They don't learn from battles, they repeat the same actions endlessly. Their growth rate is pitiful. After this field trip, Cecil will gain real dungeon experience and her summon will certainly surpass Godfrey's." The combat instructor turned sharply toward Edwin, his frown deepening. But before he could speak, Sebastian's quiet cough drew their attention. "Edwin," Sebastian fixed his stern gaze on him. "Godfrey's summons are not golems. Some beasts can actually take the form of humans, don't you think?" He poured himself a cup of tea, lifting it slowly before taking a measured sip. His eyes darkened. "The most dangerous summons the world has ever known were not beasts at all, but those that looked like us." A heavy silence filled the room as Sebastian sighed. "I plan to hide this, but I need you both as my hands in this matter, so you'll hear this once and listen well. Isolde is the first student with queen potential we've had in years. She is a dual summoner, our most treasured student. But what if I told you that on the very day Godfrey awakened, the summon we gauged revealed a tier of 12.1 and a potential beyond our classifications?" His voice dropped lower, his eyes gleaming with restrained intensity. "He is an unclassified summoner." Edwin froze where he stood, his words stuck in his throat. The instructor beside him was equally stunned. This doesn't make any sense," Edwin stammered. "If he's a king-tier summoner right from the start, the world would have already known. The birth of another king-tier cannot go unnoticed. He shouldn't even be beginning as a low tier." Sebastian nodded solemnly. "That's what confuses me most. We are dealing with something we've never encountered before. That's why you must ensure he remains under our watch until we fully understand what exactly Godfrey Daniels is." "He doesn't know, does he?" the combat instructor asked quietly. Evangeline shook her head. "Of course not, and we intend to keep it that way." Godfrey exhaled heavily as he stepped back into his room and closed the door behind him. The familiar silence pressed around him. His eyes roamed across the spacious quarters, the bed in the center, the desk by the wall. His thoughts drifted toward the glowing core inside his backpack, his reward for placing third. A sudden ping from his phone pulled him out of his thoughts. Sliding it out of his pocket, he unlocked the screen. "I heard you've been discharged. You have the rest of the day to relax, so please do. Tomorrow I'll be going to the gym. Will you to come, please, Tilda?" Godfrey chuckled faintly as he read Isolde's message before typing a short reply. "I'll be there." "Thank you, meet me outside the campus tomorrow morning." His eyes widened. She didn't say anything about leaving the school gym, and I already agreed. For some, complaining after spilling milk was pointless, but not for Godfrey. He spent 15 minutes furiously texting his complaints, only for Isolde to brush them aside with crying emojis and hearts. Defeated, he tossed his phone onto the bed with a groan. Sitting cross-legged on the mattress, he opened a portal. Mountain emerged. His heavy boots struck the floor with deep, echoing thuds as his towering frame loomed over Godfrey. "You're a 4.1 elite, still on the lower end of the tier," Godfrey sighed. "So take it." He reached into his backpack and pulled out the glowing dungeon core, its pulsing light reflected in his eyes as he stretched his hand forward. Mountain knelt, his great shield and longsword clattering softly as he placed them across his back. With reverence, he accepted the orb with both gauntleted hands. The instant the core touched his palms, its glow intensified, streams of crimson energy snaking into his armored forearms. Godfrey's eyes widened as he felt the surge, the aura around Mountain swelling, his presence expanding. The knight's massive frame began to grow, the mana within him climbing higher and higher. When the core finally vanished, Mountain rose to his full height, now a towering 7.7 feet tall. His armor gleamed with a more majestic golden sheen, his broad pauldrons radiating overwhelming power. His tier had risen to 4.6. The room felt suddenly smaller, cramped by the sheer presence of the knight wielding a longsword and shield. Lifting his blade, Mountain let a wave of white energy envelop it, its sharpness so intense that even Godfrey's skin prickled from its heat. Godfrey narrowed his eyes, another adaptive skill, but this time he wasn't shocked. Unlike other summons who had to struggle and fight to gain adaptive skills, Mountain seemed to simply recall them. Ever since Mountain had read those ancient writings, the ones carved beside his throne, Godfrey had learned the truth. His summon had lived and fought for a century. Every adaptive skill Mountain revealed was one he had already learned in a forgotten lifetime. Feeling his own mana reserves drop a little, Godfrey dismissed Mountain back into the soul space. He crossed his legs again, breathing deeply. Summoners have to master the art of meditation, he reminded himself. It's the only way to draw in and store mana. They were the batteries of their summons. Once their mana ran dry, their companions would be forced back into the soul space. The elites of his class, Isolde, Snow, Dale, had awakened young. Their reserves were deep, accumulated through years of meditation. They had the luxury of using their summon skills without fear. But not him. Even now, he could barely hold out after Ballista's blackout state. Supporting both Mountain and Ballista at once was impossible. Even if he managed it, neither could use a skill without being yanked back into the void. "Man, I've seen Mom do this a million times, but it's so uncomfortable." Godfrey clicked his tongue, massaging his knees while trying to focus on his breathing. Still, he pushed himself. "Meditation can enrich my soul space. It can let my summons passively grow stronger. I have to get serious." The incessant ringing of his phone finally succeeded in pulling Godfrey out of his sweet sleep. He sat up groggily, blinking as he looked around the dark room before picking up his phone, rubbing at his heavy eyes. Leaning back, he planned to take just a glance and then return to his nap, but the moment he saw Isolde's name on the caller ID, his eyes snapped open. He shot upright like a soldier doused with cold water mid-sleep. "We were supposed to go to the gym." "Oh man," he smacked his forehead and flopped back onto the bed. The phone buzzed again, its insistent ringing refusing to let him off the hook. "Hello," he answered at last, his voice thick with sleep. "I haven't cleaned up my room, can we reschedule?" There was silence for a few seconds, before a loud knock rattled his door. "You can't even give a proper excuse, we have cleaners." Isolde's voice thundered, echoing both through the phone and the door. "She came here," Godfrey's eyes widened in alarm. He couldn't believe the ridiculous excuse had left his mouth, and now Isolde was at his door to hear it. When he opened the door, there she stood, dressed in leggings, a fitted top and a cap, her golden-orange eyes gleaming with annoyance. But as her gaze caught on his messy hair and sleepy look, her expression shifted, softening with surprise. For a fleeting moment, there was a glimmer of admiration in her eyes at his dashing looks, though she quickly rolled them away. "Go get prepared," she muttered, brushing past him and dropping onto his bed as though she owned the place. "I'm waiting." "She's coming today, right?" asked Dane, the tallest among a group of boys, mostly seniors of Evergreen Summoners High. He sat on a bench in the dumbbell area, his hands clasped together, eyes fixed on the entrance. "Of course she'll come," replied another boy, the one wearing a yellow beanie as he curled a 30 kg dumbbell in one arm, smirking at the flex of his muscles. Like Dane and the rest of their circle, he was 18, a final-year student. "She's a bit late today, which is odd, but I know she'll be here." that girl's a gym rat. The boy in the beanie turned to Dane, narrowing his eyes. I know you've dated some of the rich girls in Manhattan, but this one's different. You might not succeed. You're joking, right? One of the others scoffed. There's no way Dane will fail to get a girl. It's just a girl. The last boy's words cut off when Isolde stepped into the gym. The air shifted instantly, attention drawn to her. Though still young, her discipline and dedication to training had carved her body into a strikingly elegant shape, every movement graceful yet strong. Don't act carelessly, she's at least a high-tier summoner, the beanie boy cautioned. Then his eyes narrowed. There's your crush, oh, she's with someone. They all turned as Godfrey entered beside her. His curious glances at the equipment and scenery gave him away immediately. This was his first time here. Why's he wearing a headband? One asked. Are they siblings? Dane muttered, his eyes narrowing as he took in Godfrey's features. Their hair color was close, golden locks catching the light, but while Isolde's had a faint silvery white at the tips, Godfrey's was pure gold. Doesn't seem like it, the beanie boy said, squinting. They watched as the pair claimed a spot nearby. Godfrey, after a quick chat with Isolde, picked up 2 15 kg dumbbells and started hammer curls. That's it, Dane scoffed, rising to his feet. He cracked his knuckles and strode over, glaring across the rack at Godfrey. His friends leaned forward, eager to see what would unfold. Godfrey, are you not going to drop that dumbbell? Isolde's voice reached him as she approached. Dane's eyes widened. It was his first time seeing her this close. You're not a normal human anymore, she added, her tone matter of fact. He just recently awakened. Ha, Dane's lips curved in a grin. I know, I haven't deadlifted in a while, so I was surprised how light it felt. Godfrey set the weights down and casually picked up 25 kg dumbbells. His arms flexed smoothly, showing no sign of strain. Dane's smirk faltered. Then Godfrey moved again, straight to the heavier racks. He gripped a 60 kg dumbbell with one arm, flexing as he lifted it cleanly. Without pause, he grabbed the other, balancing the pair like they were nothing. I can manage this. Godfrey turned toward Isolde, who was calmly repping with a 500 kg barbell. Dane's jaw clenched as disbelief surged through him. He's pretending, right? It was one thing to be weaker than Isolde, but weaker than this newbie. Just how many monsters was Manhattan hiding? Hey, Godfrey's voice snapped him out of his spiraling thoughts. He tilted his head, a frown forming. I've noticed you staring. Is there a problem? Dane froze, then forced a smile before stumbling back. No problem. Without another word, he turned and hurried for the exit. Where's Dane going? One of his friends exclaimed in shock as the leader of their group bolted. Godfrey made sure he was gone before turning back toward Isolde. He caught her mid-lift, her cheeks flushed. For a moment she was dazzling. His heart skipped before he quickly tore his gaze away, forcing himself back to his own exercise. He was here to train, not to stare. Isolde smirked faintly at his effort to hide it, the corner of her lips curling. Godfrey studied the bubble tea on the round table he shared with Isolde later that afternoon. The shop had a warm, modern charm, filled with soft lighting and the quiet chatter of customers. What's inside this tea? He asked, shaking his cup slightly. You don't know what bubble tea is? Isolde gasped, eyes wide. Where have you been all this while? In Amazon City, Godfrey replied calmly. I don't really eat out. My mom makes sure I take oolong tea. I brought some leaves with me. Wow, Isolde mouthed silently, astonished. Godfrey glanced around the shop, watching others sip happily at their drinks. With a shrug, he took a cautious sip of his own. His eyes widened as the sweet, creamy flavor burst across his tongue. He blinked, then took another sip, then another, before nodding in approval. It's good. See, Isolde laughed softly, her golden-orange eyes lighting up. While walking through the wide footpath, heading for the dormitory, his mind was occupied with thoughts of their field trip. Apparently, the trip was a vacation in one of the biggest Blue Gate dungeons in Manhattan, a dungeon called the Undead Desert. Unlike Green Gate dungeons, which were famous for being dangerous due to the fact that no one could leave once they entered, and most people only entered by mistake, Blue Gate dungeons were pocket dimensions. Some were as big as cities, others as vast as regions. The Undead Desert was said to be as large as one of the biggest deserts on Earth. Because of this, and the fact that the creatures within respawned after a certain time limit, Blue Gate dungeons became an unlimited resource for the authorities and guilds. From them, new metals, alloys, and rare stones had been discovered, allowing technology to keep up with the destructive might of summons, such as the combat dagger Godfrey purchased, a weapon forged from beast carcass and dungeon metal. I need to look it up. Knowing what kind of beast I'm going to face will give me an edge in attaining points. Godfrey's eyes narrowed. Of course, even during this vacation, whoever had the most kills would earn the greatest points, bringing them closer to ranking first by the end of sophomore year, and one step closer to becoming valedictorian. The sky was already orange as the sun dipped toward the horizon, preparing for its last descent and allowing darkness to creep in. The sound of blows and grunts pulled Godfrey out of his thoughts, and he turned toward the source. To his right, a group of upperclassmen surrounded a freshman with light brown curly hair, trembling like a leaf against the wall as fists pounded into his face and body. Godfrey recognized the one throwing the blows, Sam, the third year he had fought a month and some weeks ago. The freshman, on the other hand, was his dorm mate. After hearing the full story about his abduction, he knew Siegfried had the freshman wrap him up with his web, but seeing him beaten black and blue, and not even attempting to stand up for himself, irked Godfrey. There was a reason for the school's dormitory setting. As a sophomore, he was responsible for that freshman. He could allow him to be beaten, or he could do the beating himself and tell others to stay clear. Sighing heavily, Godfrey dropped his backpack. The sound of it hitting the ground drew the attention of the upperclassmen and Isaac, the freshman. When Isaac saw Godfrey, his pupils trembled with shame, and he lowered his head, hiding his bruised face in guilt. There was one painful fact about bullying. It ate away at the mind, shackling the bullied to the bully. Sometimes they were so far gone they didn't even realize they had arms to throw a punch back, at least die with dignity. This kind of thinking had put Godfrey at odds with the top boys of his class, earning him more than a few hard hits. But he was still standing, he was still in school. And they weren't. "Stop," Godfrey said in a slightly cold tone. He was already annoyed by the fact that third-year students were ganging up on a freshman who didn't even have the backbone to fight back, all while jeering at him. "What?" Derek, a muscular upperclassman, raised an eyebrow. He had slicked his gelled hair backward, and his muscles pressed tightly against his white turtleneck. Strangely, though, he wore round glasses. The frown on his face made it clear he was pissed off. Godfrey looked at the girl beside him, obviously a freshman, and shook his head. "He's under my authority. I'll discipline him myself." "Wow, I finally meet the famous humanoid summoner in person, and he's already cocky because he came third." Derek cocked his head. "Do I look like those inexperienced sophomores to you?" He got his head slammed into the wall like a fruit last time, and wrapped up in a web sack the second time. Beaten so badly it took 2 days to recover. The only way he could come out of there was by making sure Dale, Siegfried, Maldred, and Orwin were suspended, and here he is claiming to be a tough boy. Sam snickered, tapping Isaac's head. "Isn't that right?" "You've done enough, let him go," Godfrey said firmly. "And who are you to tell me that?" Derek shot forward with a step, throwing a powerful straight punch aimed to break Godfrey's nose and knock him out. He knew Godfrey wasn't weak, but that strength was only notable among sophomores, most of whom hadn't even faced life-threatening battles in dungeons. And without a summon, a sophomore was even more vulnerable. But to his shock, Godfrey's body gravitated left, pulling his face out of the punch's path. The move was so natural and fluid that Derek's heart skipped a beat. His eyes followed Godfrey's movement, watching as his left hand folded into a fist and tore forward. He could see it, but dodging it was another matter. Godfrey's fist slammed squarely into his face, breaking his glasses and sending him staggering backward as blood dripped from his nostrils. Wiping his nose, Derek saw the crimson stain on his fingers and his eyes darkened. "I'll." Godfrey slammed his right foot into Derek's chin, throwing him off his feet and crashing him to the hard floor. "Since when can Godfrey fight?" Sam's eyes widened. The others around him were shocked and slowly distanced themselves from Isaac. After all, that was number 13 in the Nexus Club, yet Godfrey displaced him with only 2 moves. Fighting him hand-to-hand was a mistake, an upperclassman muttered. They might have ganged up on Godfrey, but he was a dual summoner, with that annoying summon that could copy another summon's innate skill. Having trained in hand-to-hand combat, mostly boxing, for years so he could stand up to low-tier summoners, Godfrey was simply too much now that he was as strong as a top-level elite. Good, Derek's eyes snapped open. He took the broken glasses still hanging on his face, squeezed it into a ball and tossed it away. A portal flared up before him and a creature emerged. An ant, but with a humanoid shape. It stood balanced on 4 jagged, insectoid legs, each ending in sharp points that dug into the ground with predatory ease. Its body was wrapped in pale armored plates that looked grown rather than forged, leaving dark, sinewy muscle exposed in the gaps. One arm ended in a set of hooked, clawed fingers, while the other had become a single massive blade, curved and heavy like a scythe. Its head was small and low beneath the hunched plates of its shoulders, with twitching antennae and a set of jutting mandibles that gave it a constant, hungry snarl. This creature was the Elder Warrior Ant, a 5.5 high-tier summon. "You'll regret what you just did," his eyes gleamed. My outline isn't much anymore. I can't really see into the future, so I'll have to upload one chapter, today and tomorrow, while filling up the outline. Having a clear picture of the future keeps me at ease. Just wanted to let you guys know. Thanks for reading, and don't forget to support. Special thanks to @RedGhost91 for the gift and the rest of you for the Power Stones milestone we just crossed. We've hit 200 PS. Mountain quickly emerged from a golden diagram that flared to life just as the Elder Warrior Ant launched itself at Godfrey. The huge knight materialized before him, activating Blackout State, rising to 5.6 and raising his great shield as the ant's scythe arm tore through the air, unleashing a quadruple echo slash. It was an adaptive skill that allowed the ant to unleash 4 strikes in a single second. The sound of metal colliding against metal rang like thunder, and 4 slightly deep scars etched themselves across the great shield. Yet Mountain remained standing, his ironclad boots sinking into the stone ground as a gust of wind, born from the ant's speed, blew sand outward in a violent swirl. The Elder Warrior Ant launched its fist, unleashing an air cannon punch that made the air ripple like silken cloth before bursting with a mighty roar. Lightning crackled across Mountain's armor, flooding through his body and granting him astonishing speed. In a blur, he shifted to the side, leaving streaks of lightning sizzling in midair. Meanwhile, Godfrey seized Isaac and yanked him away from the cannon's path just as it struck the wall with terrifying force, blowing out a section wide enough for a man to walk through. The blast exposed the hallway, prompting students inside to look out with shocked eyes. Isaac gasped, his breath caught in his throat, as he watched the 2 high-tier summons clash with relentless intensity. After absorbing enough blows, Mountain surged forward with a rumbling grunt. Closing in at lightning pace, he swung his massive sword, but the ant proved agile, its powerful legs propelling it backward, just out of reach. "Godfrey's dead," Sam snickered, relieved that a member of the Nexus Club would finally put Godfrey in his place, giving them the perfect chance to pummel him and force him into submission. The thought was short-lived. Mountain hurled his shield, and it slammed into the Elder Warrior Ant with crushing force, flinging the creature like a ragdoll. It crashed through a tree planted in the median strip and slammed against the wall of a dormitory, opposite the one already damaged. With a tremendous leap, Mountain barreled forward, his gauntlet crashing into the ant's face before it could recover. He seized it by the head and hammered it repeatedly against the wall, each blow so heavy that stone cracked and splintered. Finally, the creature's head burst through the wall into the hallway, startling the freshmen already shaken by the earlier destruction. Mountain released the limp Elder Warrior Ant and turned back. Some upperclassmen recoiled in terror, Sam being the first to flee. "Is this really a golem?" Isaac's pupils shrank in disbelief. Derek trembled as Mountain advanced, the crimson steel giant towering like a hill of iron and blood. His breathing was steady yet heavy, a suffocating presence that could crush courage from any man. But to Derek's relief, Mountain simply walked past him. Or so it seemed. Mountain halted after 2 steps. Derek froze, a chill running down his spine. Slowly, he turned his head just as Mountain tilted his own slightly. The knight's arm snapped out, the back of his gauntleted hand slamming across Derek's face with devastating force. Derek's eyes rolled white as he crumpled like a puppet whose strings had been severed. Godfrey raised an eyebrow. "You didn't have to do that," he said, half amused. Just then, Isaac fell to his knees and kowtowed, his forehead striking the paved ground. "I didn't mean to do it. Siegfried forced me to do it." "Let's go." Godfrey picked up his bag, ignoring the wide-eyed stares of the freshmen, and began walking away with Isaac trailing behind him like a downcast puppy. Mountain dissolved into a diagram and vanished. "Isn't that number 13 in the Nexus Club?" one freshman whispered, pointing at Derek's unconscious form with trembling fingers. "And that summon that defeated him, wasn't it the humanoid summon?" Another added, disbelief thick in his voice. "Will you allow yourself to be bullied? Is that what you'll achieve in Manhattan?" Godfrey asked later, sitting on his bed while Isaac lingered in the doorway, head lowered. Isaac said nothing. "Show me your summon." Isaac hesitated, glancing around nervously before whispering, "It won't fit, and it doesn't like tiny spaces." Godfrey frowned, his brows knitting together. "It won't fit in here. What kind of summon is that?" "It's called the Mammoth Spider," Isaac replied meekly. Godfrey opened his laptop, typing the name into the search bar. The results popped up instantly, and his eyes widened. The mammoth spider, if awakened during adolescence, would already stand at the peak of the elite tier. A staggering 5.4, it grew to 8 feet tall in adolescence and up to 20 feet in adulthood, with a potential rating of 7.5. He looked at Isaac, head bowed in shame, then back at the screen, where the monstrous spider glared back at him. Its gleaming carapace bore streaks of black and yellow, hairless yet polished to a glassy sheen, as if its body itself was armored. The text detailed more. The creature possessed innate immunity to bludgeoning, making fists and clubs utterly useless against it. It was immune to poison, impervious to illusions, and resistant to mental interference. Its webs, shimmering with eerie strength, were immune to fire. Even among high tiers, the mammoth spider stood at the pinnacle of monsters, and yet its summoner was this broken boy, physically gifted but mentally shattered, strong in body but a coward in spirit. Godfrey realized the truth. The mammoth spider was notorious for awakening late. Isaac must have endured elementary school and middle school powerless, bullied endlessly until the scars became chains that still bound his mind. Godfrey tore a page from his notebook and began to write. Isaac peeked, fidgeting, pinching his fingers with anxiety. "Take this," Godfrey handed him the sheet. Isaac scanned it and frowned. 100 push-ups, crunches, squats, is this punishment? I'd rather take a beating, he muttered. Scoffing, Godfrey activated Echo, and a longsword shimmered into his grasp. Isaac hiccuped in fright. "Maybe you can recover easily from a punch," Godfrey said, voice calm, "but I don't think it'll be the same if I use this sword." Isaac shivered. "I'll give you my details. Record yourself live while you do every exercise on that list and send it to me. Oh, and read the last part." Isaac's eyes widened as he reached the bottom. "I should not lose a fight, or you'll cut the legs of my summon." "Good thing we have a healer in this school," Godfrey replied with a soft smile, but in Isaac's eyes it looked nothing like kindness. It was the smile of a devil. I was planning to lock after this chapter, but here's the deal. If I see a lip-curling, heart-racing review, I'll keep the story open for the next 3 chapters straight. Thank you all so much for the support so far. We've already hit 20 power stones, and now we're aiming for 40 golden tickets. Drop a comment, share your thoughts, and let's keep the momentum alive. Cheers. Once the weekend was over, Godfrey, dressed in his deep blue school jacket, ascended the broad staircase leading to the 3rd floor where his classroom was located. He carried his backpack in one hand, his ocean blue eyes slightly narrowed as he noticed freshmen casting more glances at him than usual. Isn't he the one who made Dale and the other sophomore elites get suspended? A 15-year-old freshman girl whispered to her friend, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. His name is Godfrey. He also beat Nexus Club number 13. He's like some kind of bully bane. The school feels calmer with him around, someone else said reverently. He's going to be put in his place soon, a boy muttered darkly as he strode past the girls and disappeared into the 2nd floor hallway. Godfrey paused mid-step, his eyes locking on a scene below. A brown, curly-haired boy crouched on the ground, arms raised to shield himself as 2 fellow freshmen, a boy and a girl, kicked at him while spitting insults. "I'm sorry, Isaac's voice broke off when he caught sight of Godfrey's cold glare from the corner of his eye. That chilling look sent ice crawling down his spine. "Get off me," he suddenly screamed, and in panic, he launched a web strike that latched onto the girl's wrist, pinning it to the wall. Shoving aside the boy's next kick, Isaac sprang to his feet and instinctively caught the boy's panic punch. His fist flew on its own, slamming into the boy's cheek with a sharp sound. Both froze, the boy clutching his face in wide-eyed shock, and Isaac staring in disbelief that he had done that. The girl ripped free of one strand of web, turning her delicate fingers into 3-inch-long claws, but Isaac moved faster. Another web shot pinned her arm to the wall, another bound her other hand, and a final strand sealed her mouth before she could curse. Her eyes widened in terror. The boy fled immediately, leaving Isaac standing frozen in the aftermath, stunned at himself. Those who had long grown used to Isaac being treated like a slave for the past month were equally stunned. Yet when their eyes shifted back to Godfrey, he simply resumed climbing the staircase, leaving the scene behind him as though he were nothing more than a distant observer. The moment Godfrey entered his classroom, silence rippled across the room. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Students in their seats and those huddled in groups all turned to look at him, the quiet stretching long and heavy. Godfrey's eyes swept over the class. Dale, Siegfried, Maldred, and Orwin's seats were empty. Tilting his head, he noticed Snow scrolling casually through his phone, pointedly ignoring him. That didn't bother him, but what did was Isolde's brief glance in his direction before she turned back to the window, her cold dismissal strung. She was clearly unhappy that he had skipped their morning jog, and Godfrey knew he owed her an apology or risked being snubbed by the only friend he had. As he made his way to his seat, a girl from the press club leaned towards Cecil and whispered, "I didn't have the courage before since you were under Dale, but now, you have to admit, Godfrey's looks are only beaten by Snow's. Just look at him walk." Cecil's eyes flicked to Godfrey. Indeed, he wasn't bad-looking, but admiration rubbed her the wrong way. To her, that face deserved to be stepped on, not praised. A sharp harumph escaped Isolde, reaching Godfrey's ears as he sat down. He grimaced, turning toward her with pursed lips, a crease in his brow, and a meek expression, the very picture of apology. Isolde clicked her tongue, though her coldness quickly melted. Seeing her soften, Godfrey seized the chance. "I'm sorry. I tend to fall asleep during meditation, foolishly. I've never lasted over 20 minutes awake. I met John this morning, so I didn't jog alone, but don't miss another day. It wasn't the same without you." The rest of her words barely registered. One name alone echoed in his head. John. Godfrey's mood soured instantly. Of all days, it had to be the one morning when he wasn't there that Manhattan's so-called king showed up to jog with Manhattan's queen. He hadn't spoken to John before, but he'd seen the way John looked at Isolde. He was definitely into her. "We've been jogging together since middle school, but it felt different today. I could tell he didn't even like Shooting Stars music, and yet," Isolde kept talking, but Godfrey barely heard. His chest tightened with unfamiliar jealousy. For a moment, he considered distancing himself, but instead, he rose abruptly, wrapping his arm around Isolde's head and drawing her cheek against his chest. The entire classroom froze. Isolde's porcelain face flushed crimson, her already large golden-orange eyes widening further. Her thoughts shattered beneath his steady scent and the warmth of his body. "Knock on my door if I don't show up," Godfrey said calmly. He didn't promise not to miss again. He knew his flawed meditation habits too well. "Lazy bum," Isolde scoffed, trying to hide her fluster as he returned to his seat. Godfrey blinked innocently at the stunned class. For the first time, he noticed Snow glaring at him with enough venom to kill. He just rapped a Pendragon and she didn't resist. Godfrey of all people, what's wrong with Isolde? Gasps and whispers erupted around them, loud enough for him to hear. His cheeks warmed as he realized the implication of his impulsive act. Just then, Teacher Edwin strode into the classroom. Surprised by the hush, he quickly decided to take advantage of it. "Ahem," he cleared his throat. "I hope everyone here is prepared for the field trip. Tomorrow we leave for a 2-week stay in the Undead Desert. This is your chance to grow stronger and compete for the top 3 positions by year's end. Best Summoner, Best Summon, and Best Academic. Points accumulated during the trip will carry significant weight, so give it your all." His gaze swept the room before he continued. "Today we'll discuss a particular adaptive skill called Elemental Infusion. Godfrey's summon demonstrates it best, but there are numerous sub-skills attached to it. Advanced skill set is the term often applied to those that develop from elemental infusion. Now." Later that day, Edwin strolled the hallway during break with a bottle of water in hand. His steps slowed when he noticed a crowd gathered around the school board. Curious, he approached. Students scattered at his presence. But not before he caught sight of the notice pinned at the top, highlighted in red. His eyes darkened. The paper claimed that Manhattan harbored a King Tier student hiding his true power, an anonymous figure dubbed the Shadow King. And the writer had chosen to remain anonymous. The press club door swung open, slamming against the wall with a loud bang. Cecil shot to her feet, hard lines forming on her temples as she prepared to scold whoever dared to act so rudely. But when she saw Edwin, her glare shifted into a frown of confusion. Edwin strode toward her in wide steps, waving the newspaper he had pulled from the board. "What's this Shadow King supposed to mean?" he asked, his tone stern. Cecil narrowed her eyes. "It's the job of the press club to reveal anything we discover in the school, as long as it's the truth." "Truth?" Edwin's voice grew colder. "One more paper about this and you'll face expulsion." His verdict made Cecil's eyes widen. So, he's truly a King Tier. Edwin placed a firm hand on the long table. "Matters of King Tier summoners grow beyond you, beyond your family, and even beyond this school. If you draw the attention of the authorities with baseless rumors, you won't walk away unscathed. Remember, you're here to be scouted by them. If you came here yourself, then it means Godfrey truly has King Tier potential. But why would the authorities flinch at someone who only has potential? Most of the time, those with so-called potential never truly reach King Tier." Cecil shot back. "He is an unclassified summoner." The headmaster's voice echoed in Edwin's head. His eyes hardened as he glared at Cecil before turning away. "Drop it, focus on your studies." After he left, Cecil clenched her fists so tightly her nails dug into her palms. "Ah," she screamed, scattering papers across the room in a violent burst. With a furious kick, she struck the table. The wooden slab slammed against the ceiling and crashed down in two broken halves. "He's just fatherless trash who got famous because his father died before some stupid orc." Her teeth ground together as rage twisted her features. "Who exactly is Godfrey Daniels, that the school threatens me just to protect him?" Her glare sharpened, complex thoughts flashing in her eyes. "They even suspended Dale," she muttered. The next day, students began boarding two light blue coach buses. Already seated, Godfrey looked out the window just as Isolde approached with her luggage. His lips curled upward when he noticed her hair untied. There was always a natural, almost regal charm to her when she let it flow free instead of binding it in a ponytail. Once her luggage was stowed, she boarded the bus, stepping down the aisle until she paused at Godfrey's row. The boy sitting beside him froze, glancing between her and Godfrey. Isolde's golden-orange eyes flared subtly as she glared at the boy. Godfrey only shrugged, feigning innocence. The boy panicked under her gaze, quickly scrambling out of the seat. Isolde slid in with a faint, satisfied smile. Godfrey's shoulders trembled as he chuckled quietly, until Isolde's head snapped toward him. "Why are you laughing?" "Nothing," he replied quickly, waving a hand. She clicked her tongue and pulled out her earpods, but before she could put them in, Godfrey plucked one. She pouted but wore the other, pressing play on Shooting Stars music. Soon, both of them leaned back in their seats, sharing the rhythm in silence. From the back of the bus, Snow leaned against his headrest, his eyes fixed on them like twin blades. He closed them slowly, his thoughts dark. "I'll put him in his place soon enough. His summons may threaten the likes of Cecil and the others, but before mine, there'll be nothing but statues." To Snow, Godfrey was nothing more than trash left too long in the bin. For now, he would focus on growing stronger during the field trip and wait for Dale and the others to return. When Edwin and the school nurse boarded the late bus, the convoy finally set off. They rolled smoothly out of the school gates, but soon slowed near a junction choked with traffic. Godfrey's eyes wandered outside. He saw civilians using their summons to earn a living, traffic police with heads shifted into snarling Doberman giants through echo, and window washers gliding along skyscraper panes with echo-grown wings. Summons had made daily life easier, but they had also made violence far more common. "Isn't that XYZ, the famous supermodels who are almost overtaking Shooting Star and their actors too?" one of the students behind him gasped. Godfrey looked up and saw the 42-story Pagoda Guild branch towering above. A massive screen near the top displayed the faces of three stunningly handsome men, each with their summons, handsome even beyond Snow. Shooting Star appeared on the screen as well, alongside entertainers and combatants who cleared dungeons. Apparently, the more famous you were, the higher your image appeared on the building. Guilds in this world weren't just for adventurers, they were platforms for superstardom. Fighters, entertainers, influencers, all could rise through their ranks, and yet all remained under the supervision of the authorities' agents. Godfrey's lip curled faintly. He had no good opinion of either. "Man, it would be great to become an elite member of the Pagoda Guild," another student sighed wistfully. The rest of the journey passed peacefully, until the buses slowed as a massive, swirling blue portal appeared on the horizon. The moment they crossed, the bustling metropolis vanished. A vast desert stretched before them, dunes rolling like waves, rock spires jutting skyward, and the horizon shimmering under harsh sun. "The mana here feels thicker," Isolde murmured. Godfrey raised an eyebrow. To him, the air felt no different, only the scenery had changed. The asphalt road cut straight through the desert, leading toward a sprawling city built around a glittering oasis. Above it hung a golden, translucent dome, like a bowl turned upside down over a plate. "If you'd like to know," Edwin announced, "that dome is the innate skill of Manhattan's King Tyr, the dragon tortoise." The students marveled as the buses passed through the glowing barrier and entered the city. Just then, two white coach buses drew up alongside, matching their pace. The Manhattan students stiffened when they saw the logo, Polaris Summoners High School. Polaris was as famous as it was flamboyant, a school for the rich where preferential treatment was bought and students were bred for guild careers. Unlike Manhattan's packed buses, Polaris carried barely 20 students, spread across two buses for comfort and space. The first bus held the boys of House Orion, all third-year students. The second held the girls of House Lyra. At Vega's prime resort, both convoys stopped. students filed out, their eyes immediately sizing up the opposition. From House Orion, 3 boys stood out among the rest with their looks and aura. A tall, grey-haired youth with an aloof expression walked in the center, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. To his right was a broad-shouldered, deep brown-skinned boy with his hair tied upward, and to his left, a long-haired youth with an eye patch, though both his eyes were perfectly fine. Alastair Nathaniel, the brown-skinned boy, murmured to the grey-haired one, "The white-haired boy is Snow, and the girl is Isolde." Lucian, the eye-patch wearer, finished, his gaze sharp on her. "A true Pendragon, but who's that?" A girl with deep blue hair, Rosalind, second only to the pink-haired beauty beside her among House Lyra's elites, lifted a brow at the sight of Godfrey walking side by side with Isolde. "Apart from Snow and Isolde, the rest of them aren't worth mentioning. I didn't see him in the reports," Nathaniel replied, glancing dismissively at Godfrey. "Is he her knight? Manhattan's kings and queens usually have knights," Rosalind mused. "Isn't the knight usually the second strongest?" Lucian countered. "I've never even heard of that boy." "Then who is he?" Seraphina, the pink-haired girl, finally spoke. "Who cares? I bet 100 grand Seraphina could turn him into her puppet before this trip is over." Lucian's words riled up the others. 200 grand for 3 days. You don't expect Polaris Queen to spend that long turning a no-name into a puppet. Nathaniel laughed. On the other hand, Seraphina tucked her pink hair behind her ear. "I'm only interested in Snow. That boy, whoever he is not worth my time." Godfrey was stunned as he stood on a serene slope road, right before a private apartment surrounded by neatly arranged trees and flowers blooming in quiet splendor. Staring at the card in his hand, he still couldn't believe an entire apartment had been given to him. Apparently, this special treatment was because he came third during the competition. Isolde got 1. And so did Snow and Cecil. The other 2 were the sophomores' top students, so rank or no rank, they naturally received preferential treatment. The rest of the students stayed in large rooms, 2 per room, while all the Polaris students were rewarded with private apartments. Godfrey simply couldn't understand the level of flamboyancy these people lived on. Their aloof expressions, their outrageous arrogance, it all pricked him the wrong way. He would stay out of their path, as long as they stayed out of his. The only bitter thought tugging at him now was the distance between his apartment and Isolde's. After opening the door with the card, Godfrey walked into the apartment. The lights automatically lit up, revealing a living room set with a soft leather sofa, a huge TV, and polished wooden aesthetics that brightened his eyes. He carried his luggage to his room, set everything in order, and collapsed on the bed. With his hands behind his head, he stared at the ceiling as his thoughts began to wander. Unconsciously, he replayed the times his summons had fought. Before long, his mind returned to the adaptive skill, Aegis Shield, the one Snow had used against Isolde. It looked remarkably powerful, and now that he thought about it, something like that would make Mountain far stronger. His great shield was one of his main weapons, but recent enemies had shown enough offensive power to crack it, neutralizing one of his most iconic abilities, Reflection. If Mountain could strengthen that shield with something akin to Aegis, then he would truly become an immovable wall. Godfrey was certain that by tomorrow, they would leave the city and venture into the more dangerous parts of the dungeon, territories teeming with raptors and undead hordes. The thought alone tightened his resolve. Enhancing Mountain's shield would be the best way to ensure more points. Godfrey sat on Mountain's stone throne, leaning forward with his fingers entwined, his ocean blue eyes locked on the 2 knight captains facing off against each other. The Chamber of Summons was a grand square hall, bright white with marble-like tiles, tall pillars, and ancient engravings etched into the walls. Torches lined the walls but burned with a steady golden flame. Mountain stood tall, tightening his grip on his immense shield. His armor, the huge pauldrons and cuirass, made him look like a walking fortress. His stern eyes never wavered from his opponent from within the helm's slit. Across from him stood Ballista, his great bow held loosely in one hand. Godfrey raised an eyebrow. He could almost feel the tension, the rivalry, thick in the air between them. It stunned him for a moment. And in that brief moment, Ballista moved. He mounted his great bow, manifested an arrow, drew, and released. The sound that followed shook the chamber as the arrow tore through the air, slamming into Mountain's shield and piercing through his shield arm. Mountain slid backward, the impact tearing cracks into the stone floor until he came to a stop. Blood dripped from his arm, splattering across the pristine white tiles. Lightning faintly crackled over his armor, his body trembling. Yet with a heavy grunt, he straightened, raised his shield again, and marched forward with bold steps, ignoring the massive arrow still lodged in his flesh. Godfrey's eyes narrowed. So this is the difference between a Golden Order knight built for offense and one built for defense. He understood. Both were enhanced by the perks of their armor, but right now, Mountain had been ordered to only defend. Against Ballista, who unleashed offense like a storm, he couldn't stand. Most times, adaptive skills awakened when a summon was cornered, when survival demanded evolution. This should be Mountain's chance to learn. The second arrow came, piercing Mountain's shield once more, burrowing into his cuirass. Godfrey's face twisted. His chest grew heavy at the sight of Mountain bleeding through his armor. He frowned heavily. If he dies here, that's it. A dead summon can't be respawned. Maybe I should order him to evade, but will that awaken a shield skill? No, it would only be a waste of time. I can't push it. His thoughts snapped as Ballista summoned a new arrow. This one was different, its shaft glowing red, its golden head crackling violently with lightning. The bow knight's entire body sparked with golden arcs of energy. Godfrey's eyes widened. Elemental infusion, just like the variant Mountain had but designed to deal great damages. The release was instant. The air exploded, lightning screaming like a banshee as the arrow shot forward. Godfrey barely had time to register what he was seeing before the arrow collided with Mountain. The chamber erupted in a blinding golden flash. The shockwave tore through the hall. Pillars shattered, stones blew out of place. Even Godfrey barely remained on the throne, wincing as debris cut shallow wounds into his skin. But when the light died down, Mountain was still standing. Godfrey staggered upright, his jaw slack as his eyes caught the sight. Mountain's shield had changed. No longer the oval great shield, it now stood like a titan, over 7 feet tall, broad and round. Its face gleamed pure white, a thick golden sun emblazoned at its core with rays etched in delicate detail. The rim of the shield shone with heavy gold plating, and the ground around it bore the marks of destruction, shattered tiles, cracked stone, except the space within the shield's boundary, which remained untouched. Godfrey's breath caught. That isn't Aegis' shield. Ballista, unshaken, knocked 3 arrows and fired in rapid succession. The arrows struck the mighty shield, only to ricochet off, spinning wildly midair before curving back toward the shooter. Godfrey's eyes widened, astonished. He could see that Mountain controlled the ricochets and their directions. His lips curved into the faintest smile. Ballista summoned the crimson arrow once again, his whole body blazing with lightning, the skill Godfrey quietly named Trailblazer. The arrow tore through the air, colliding with the sun shield. Mountain staggered back 3 steps, the floor cracking beneath him. The shield held, the damage reflected, sending Ballista crashing to his knees, a smoking wound carved deep across his chest. "Ballista," Godfrey called out. The bow knight raised his head with a weak nod, showing he was alive. Mountain, his massive shield still planted firmly into the ground, waved his blood-stained arm as though to say, "You injured me first." Godfrey did not know whether to laugh at his fortune that both summons now had powerful skills that would be even more formidable in blackout state, or cry that they were both badly injured. He would need to meet the school nurse. That skill was nothing like Aegis' shield. I'll call it Achilles' shield. "Who's there?" Julia, the school nurse, rose to her feet from behind her desk, making her way to the door with slight confusion. "It's me, Godfrey." That reply made her expression morph into one of disbelief. "Godfrey Daniels, you got injured so fast," she sighed inwardly. "I knew it wasn't a good idea to allow you to stay in Manhattan." The moment she opened the door, her lips curled upward and her eyes squinted, revealing a beautiful smile on her kind, oval-shaped face framed by curls. "Godfrey, come in." Godfrey stepped into her apartment, which had been converted into her office. The space was lined with neat sickbeds, cabinets of supplies, and rows of bottled tonics glowing faintly, a product of her summon's adaptive skill for healing lighter wounds like bruises and sprains. The apartment itself was well kept, the bright white lights and long curtains providing both comfort and privacy for patients. Julia turned back to the teen, who was looking around with his usual calm but observant eyes. "What happened? I don't see any harm done to you." "Oh, I'm fine. It's my summons that need healing. They're badly wounded." Julia blinked, her brows furrowing. "Do golems get healed? I haven't seen that in all my years of practice. They're just metal, stone, and wood. At least the wooden ones can be mended, but stone and steel." Godfrey tried to stay out of fights, she said, sighing heavily at the dilemma. Even if she couldn't heal his so-called golems, it meant he wouldn't be able to participate in the hunt tomorrow, a good thing in her mind. that way he wouldn't be made a target. "Show them to me," she said softly, gesturing toward one of the sick beds. Now that she had stopped speaking, Godfrey clarified, "I wasn't in any fight. My summons were training and ended up wounding each other. They've got some kind of beef, and train like it's an actual battle." Julia scoffed inwardly. What sort of golem has beef? Her eyes went wide when Ballista appeared, lying on the bed. His enormous plated form took up most of the mattress. A massive hole gaped in the cuirass, and the smell of burnt flesh oozed from the wound beneath. Blood stained the steel, and though his helm concealed his features, the knight's rigid silence revealed how much pain he endured. Julia went pale. Her gaze snapped left as Mountain manifested beside her, towering with his fortress-like build. The giant's armored forearm was split and bleeding, crimson seeping from beneath the cracked plates. Her hands trembled, her face twisted in terror. "These aren't golems in the slightest," she whispered. Godfrey glanced at her from the corner of his eye, unsure why she was panicking. His stomach twisted. Was Ballista unsavable? The second the thought crossed his mind, fear gripped him. "Miss Julia, can't Ballista be saved?" His voice shook, guilt and dread burning in his chest. Julia flinched, realizing her own reaction, and forced herself to compose. "I can heal it. The damage pierced through plate armor, chainmail, and leather. The wound won't kill him as long as I—" She froze, had she just addressed the summon as him. Exhaling heavily, she summoned her own healing diagram. A warm glow filled the room as her spirit's power extended over the two knights. Slowly, Mountain's gaping wound began to knit itself together, the blood vanishing as plates sealed and reformed as though alive. In less than 2 minutes, Mountain was whole again, his enormous shield resting by his side. Even his armor had been restored, which made Julia's eyes widen. She couldn't heal steel, so why had his armor mended? Her heart raced. This armor, it's their hide, like dragon scales. Ballista's healing took longer. For 20 agonizing minutes, his cuirass and body knitted shut, while his labored, rough breathing finally steadied. Julia didn't notice her own hand inching closer to his helm until she was nearly touching it. Suddenly, Ballista's massive gauntleted hand shot up. His grip encircled her wrist like a shackle of cold iron. Though his visor bore no eyeholes, she felt his glare suffocatingly furious. "You dare attempt to desecrate an anointed knight?" The voice thundered, sonorous and deep, not the rolling rumble of mountains, but sharp, like a war drum booming inside her chest. A primal chill shot down Julia's spine, her soul almost fleeing her body. She froze in place. Godfrey quickly retrieved both Ballista and Mountain, tucking them back into his soul's space. Julia remained stiff, locked in terror. The aura they had unleashed still lingered in the air. It wasn't human nor golem. It was the oppressive weight of predators gazing upon their prey. When she looked at Godfrey, she flinched at the calmness on his face. "They get a little angry over weird stuff, don't overthink it, and thanks for healing them." Godfrey turned and left. The moment the door shut, Julia collapsed onto the nearest bed, breath ragged. Her mind reeled. Those things weren't golems. It all made sense now, the headmaster's urgent calls, the school's decision not to expel Godfrey, but instead suspend many of the sophomore elite. It wasn't because of connections. It wasn't favoritism. It was his summons. She had never seen anything like them. They weren't living sculptures of stone or metal, nor simple beasts. They were knights of flesh, blood, and spirit. Beasts made men, men made beasts. The infinite potential of a human's will fused with the overwhelming strength of legendary creatures. "Knights of the Golden Order," she whispered, the name the referee always announced when Godfrey ascended the platform. Everyone else had shrugged it off as a grandiose title, but now she knew better. Those golems had bled, and one had spoken. As the sun dipped low, Godfrey raced toward the eatery after several missed calls from Isolde. After leaving the nurse's office, he had gone home to meditate and, as usual, had slipped into deep slumber. "I sent a message to everyone. What were you doing?" Edwin, standing outside the well-lit eatery, sighed, motioning for Godfrey to hurry. Godfrey broke into a jog. Inside, he spotted Isolde at a corner table. Her golden white hair shimmered under the lights as she waved at him with a bright smile. A warmth spread through him, softening his face into a smile, until his gaze shifted upward. The Polaris students sat on the second floor, near the glass railing. Their eyes followed him, some with curiosity, others with sharp disdain. "I looked him up. That's the son of the Amazon City hero, Roland Daniels," said Alastair, the grey-haired junior, his voice calm but his eyes filled with scorn. "That's the son of the man who fought 100,000 orcs. I've heard of his trash son, the one who couldn't awaken a summon, despite his parents' powerful ones. So that's him, muttered Lucian, the long-haired youth with an eye patch, staring at Godfrey like a zoo curiosity. Well, he finally awakened at the Manhattan ceremony, Alastair continued smoothly, but only with a golem night summon. What? Rosalind's pretty face scrunched in visible disgust. We have one back at home, Seraphina said calmly. Her crystalline pink eyes glimmered like jewels as she glanced at Snow, who sat below but like a royal amongst commoners. They're useful for menial jobs and heavy lifting. People like them are still needed in our world, to serve, of course. Nathaniel chuckled, lounging back in his chair. I guess the bet's void now. There's no fun in turning what's already a puppet into a puppet. Tusk, he's already Isolde's puppet. Rosalind clicked her tongue. The next day, Manhattan and Polaris coach buses had come to a stop in the middle of the desert, with dunes and stone formations populating the expanse, setting up their individual camps. Godfrey stood outside the camp made of tents around their coach buses with the others, holding a backpack with enough food and water to last him days. Apparently, this trip was to make them adapt to the harsh terrain of dungeons, as that would be a major part of their life after graduating. He stood at the front with Isolde, Cecil, Snow, and some other students, facing Edwin, who was on a podium, his stern eyes fixed on them. I shall begin to inform you. There are maps inside your bags, indicating the major zones around this area, from low-tier zones to elite and finally high-tier zones. Remember, some creatures also roam, so you're not safe anywhere. He paused, watching as some students' faces changed. Most of them had not even entered dungeons, and it was normal as dungeon fights usually began at the sophomore class, but it was advisable to get dungeon experience beforehand. However, most parents were afraid, but the few who went, his eyes descended on Isolde, Snow, and Godfrey, and as he thought, they were calm. Cecil, though calm, was still a bit flustered. This would be her first-time journey alone through harsh terrain with nothing but her summon. It was such a bond that made summoners and their summons stronger. Is there going to be some kind of way to prevent us from dying? She finally asked when the whispers grew too loud. Edwin chuckled, of course. The moment he said that, a light purple diagram appeared beside him and a snail, the height of his waist, crawled out. Its shell gleamed like polished stone, marked with constellations connected by glowing lines that shimmered faintly as if the stars themselves were alive. 2 luminous eyes protruded from its stalks, shining bright like the headlights of a car. This was a violet astral mollusk, a creature that could teleport itself or others, had omniperception that spanned tens of miles. It could also teleport itself to places it had locked on, no matter the distance, and this was in consideration to planets or systems. They were the spearheaders of mankind's space exploration, the summons of the world's top astronauts. Almost every student had seen it on television, once or twice, but they were quite stunned to see their homeroom teacher had such a unique summon. This is the violet astral mollusk. It will enable me to oversee this hunt. The moment your life is threatened, and I am sure it would either lead to grave injury or death, you will be teleported back. He turned left. As you can see, there are several canopies with your names on it. Your kills will be teleported there. Just make sure you're the one that landed the killing blow. Your points can be exchanged for items like dungeon cores, weapons, or to buy teleportation points. Let's say you want to go straight to the ruined fortress. That will cost you 20 points. He waited, making sure everyone had digested what he said before resuming. Now, your points will be measured as such. 1 point for a low tier, 2 points for an elite tier, 5 points for a low-level high tier, and 10 points for a top-level high tier. That is all. You may leave in groups or alone. After bidding each other farewell, Godfrey left the camp. He had gone to several dungeons, but none of them were like this. Looking around, all he could see was dunes and stone formations. All he could feel was the heat of the sun and his foot sinking a bit into the sand. At first, other students were not far from him, some of them moving in groups, few moving alone. Later on, Godfrey discovered he was alone in the midst of dunes. No other student was around him. He didn't know how long he had walked, but after checking the digital map in his bag, he discovered he wasn't far from a low-tier zone. According to the map, it was just behind the dune to his left. At the top of the dune, he squinted, looking at a group of raptors, red-skinned creatures with 2 powerful hind legs, relatively small forelimbs, long necks, and razor-sharp teeth. Their scales glistened under the desert sun, and their long tails cut the air like whips. They were the downsized versions of a T-Rex. This small group of 6 were not far from a rise of rock formations that spread out like the trees of a forest. Some were short, some were over 5 meters tall. He reached for the combat dagger strapped to his waist, unsheathed it, and made his way down. The raptors spotted him, screeching and roaring as they ran toward him, their long tails whipping the air. Using lightning infusion, Godfrey shot forward, plunging his dagger into the eye of the first raptor, frying its brain with the lightning, pulled it out and slit the throat of another. The third closed in enough, opening its mouth to take a chunk out of him, but received a deathly knee blow to its chin. The edge of his dagger gleamed as he unleashed a crescent light that took off the head of another raptor entirely from its body. The fifth raptor screeched loudly, clawing at him with its forelimbs, but Godfrey stepped sided, the lightning crackling through his body boosting his speed greatly. He watched the claws slice through where he once stood before retaliating with a mana slash, decapitating the fifth one also. The tail of the sixth came for him, tearing through the air with extreme force. His heart thumped, lightning moving enhancing his speed as he ducked, springing forward and stabbing the raptor. It screeched loudly as the blade was coated in white, and it tore from its shoulder down to the tail with so much ease, Godfrey was taken aback. As the beast fell with a thud, he looked at the blade of the dagger, coated with faint white light. He could feel the heat and sharpness prick his eyes. That was easier than I thought, he internally as the raptors began to vanish one by one. Unbeknownst to him, on a dune, the blue-haired Rosalind watched mounted on a ghost-faced stallion, a black horse with a skull engulfed with blue flames for a head and flaming hooves. Its mane burned like a roaring bonfire, and every exhale was smoke and ash. Seeing Godfrey take down 6 raptors without a summon made her squint. Even she couldn't do that, relying on a dagger and a few close combat skills alone. Unaware he was being watched, Godfrey walked toward the rock formation only to pause a few steps later, as multiple screeches tore through the air. He was still a good distance away from the formations, but he could feel the sand beneath his feet quake, like there was a stampede headed his way. The screeches did not only grow louder, but came from several dozen angry raptors, a small horde alerted by the screech of their now dead scouts. The first one to emerge was an alpha raptor, much bigger than the normal raptors, with bone spikes protruding out of its body and black plating over its hide. Its screech was much deeper, almost becoming a roar, and behind it were 3 dozen raptors, a great dust cloud rising in wake of this monster army. Rosalind couldn't hold back her laughter. I guess facing armies of monsters runs in the blood. She held the reins made of flames and tilted her summon away. There's nothing to watch here, let's. Her head snapped back as Ballista emerged from a diagram, his golden armor turning into blood crimson. His cloak darkened to black, and his bow seemed to hum with an ominous power, the edges glowing faintly. Oh, you really did awaken a golem at 16, she frowned. Wouldn't it have been better to remain ordinary than awaken that? The other words died in her throat as mortal portals appeared, not opened by Godfrey but by Ballista, and from it emerged 10 golden, towering bow knights with giant bows. All 10 of them drew their bows, releasing arrows with such power that dust rose in their wake. When they struck a raptor, the impact launched the beast backward as if hit by a speeding truck, tossing its bleeding corpse recklessly across the desert, some even crashing into the rock formations. Rosalind couldn't believe her eyes as the raptors lost 20 in an instant, all of them launched backward by the force of the arrows. The sight alone made her dread being on the receiving end of those bow knights. Her eyes narrowed when she noticed Ballista, whose armor had turned crimson and was now crackling with lightning, the energy gathering on his arrow. He mounted the bow on the sand, aiming for the alpha raptor which had already gained on them. The lightning grew fiercer, and wherever it struck the sand turned into liquid glass. The moment Ballista released the arrow, it sounded like a massive explosion. A gale burst outward, blasting sand into Godfrey's face as the arrow screeched like a golden meteor. It left a trail of liquid glass as it struck the alpha raptor's head, blowing it into blood mist. Yet the beast kept roaring forward, leaving an endless trail of ruins in the rock formations. All the hair on Rosalind's body stood up, a chill running down her spine, while Godfrey felt his mana reserves drop sharply. He gave Ballista an incredulous look. Was he trying to say he went easy on Mountain? Because it felt like the Bow Knight captain was making a statement here. Looking at the trail of glass on the golden sand, leading up to the ruins left by the Trailblazer, Godfrey had to accept that Ballista, in blackout state, was a formidable long-ranged summon. He tilted his head at the other Bow Knights who marched undeterred under the sun, inspecting their kills with flickering eyes. According to the information on the walls of Ballista's chambers, the beast that granted him his blackout state powers was something called an Orcish Esper, a strange and rare kind of orc bred from childhood to be able to summon their warriors. It made one man equivalent to an army. In other words, these Bow Knights moving about weren't made from nothingness, but were actual knights that came from somewhere. The others have no idea about this. Who didn't inform Alistair about this and only said he is a golem summoner? Are they trying to set us up? Panicked, Rosalind quickly rode away, careful not to be spotted. At the camp, Julia was walking by, inspecting the students' kill space, but most of them had nothing. Isolde has killed 20 raptors, Snow has killed 10, and Cecil has 6. She turned to Godfrey's name and saw 6 dead raptors. I guess he's not doing too badly. Her eyes widened as bodies began to drop until a heap of dead raptors, with a headless alpha raptor, an elite-tier beast, landed at the top. The sight made her gasp loudly, and she quickly covered her mouth with her palm, but Edwin rushed out, only to see the giant heap. Godfrey did this. Julia nodded. He has a total kill of 44 raptors. Unaware of the shock he had given Edwin and Julia, Godfrey continued his journey through the desert with Ballista by his side. The trailblazer his summon had executed nearly wiped out 50% of his mana reserves, so in order to ration what he had left, Ballista had to deactivate Blackout State, thus sending his squad of bow knights away. Currently walking through the formation, Godfrey marveled at the number of nature-formed rock pillars Ballista's arrow had brought down. A great number of them had become debris. He brought out his digital map and studied it. The ivory carcass has a lone elite-tier beast. That should be our next place, he said, looking at the bone ribs, each hundreds of meters long on the map. Whatever beast had left such a carcass after its death, he didn't want to know. After walking, drinking water, resting and walking for hours, the heat of the sun had waned by the time he saw the towering bone ribs jutting out of the golden sand and stretching across the horizon. In the midst of the yellow rocks, which looked pitifully small compared to the size of those ribs, he approached. With squinted eyes and slightly shortened breaths, Godfrey moved toward the carcass with Ballista silently following behind, the soft metallic clinks of his armor an accustomed sound to Godfrey's ears. I bet Isolde is soaring the skis on her dragon, he pouted. I wish I had a beast summon. Ballista hurried to his front with wide strides and went down on one knee, his back facing Godfrey as if telling him to get on. In all honesty, Godfrey would have, no one would see him, so it wasn't that embarrassing, but after staying for hours under the sun, Ballista's armor was scalding. He just didn't understand how the bow knight endured such heat, and even now, after trekking such a distance, still breathed calmly. I can manage, he said, walking past Ballista. When they arrived at the giant carcass, Godfrey spotted the remains of other smaller beasts. Some had become feeble bones, others were still fresh. Knowing this, Ballista turned invisible and walked away from Godfrey until the faint sound of his armor couldn't be heard anymore. Not too far in, a desert stone lioness, a huge big cat with small flat stones the size of pebbles on her back, left the raptor it fed on and fixed its gaze on Godfrey, who had just walked into her line of sight. Both of them looked at each other for a split second before the lioness left her kill, pouncing toward a better-looking one. On the other hand, Godfrey took the challenge head-on. He still hadn't forgotten why he wanted strength, to make the authorities stop treating his mother like their slave. He hated the leash they held around her neck. He couldn't stand the sight of his father's statue being brought down. If he was strong, they wouldn't have dared to touch it, at least not if they wanted to curry favor with him. He wanted to become a valedictorian. What was wrong with being the best? With all this in mind, he slid as the lioness jumped, attempting to pin him to the ground, but his movement countered her strike. He stabbed his combat dagger at her underbelly, but instead of the friction aiding him in gutting her open, the combat dagger snapped. His eyes widened, lightning bursting out of his body at the renewed assessment of the beast. The lioness turned, its claws gleaming like gold as they headed for his chest, but he leaped back. The beast leaped after him only for an arrow to dart into its open mouth, piercing deep into its throat. Ballista appeared about 20 meters behind Godfrey. He had made a wide turn around the desert lioness, appearing where neither Godfrey nor the lioness expected. Godfrey collapsed on the sand. That fight hadn't lasted 2 minutes, but even a single mistake or delay would have cost him his life. Even the sand didn't feel so hot with the burst of victory pumping in his heart. A wide smile graced his face. A minute later, he sat, eating biscuits from his bag with a can of water beside him under the shadow of a giant rib. While eating, his eyes were on the digital map. Of the zones marked on it, the most prominent one, marked crimson, was that of a ruined fortress, the place where the undead were. Step after step, Godfrey moved through the vast expanse of golden sand under the hot sun like a nomad. He thought he knew how to survive in dungeons, but 3 days without a soft bed, the scorch of the sun, and beasts hungry for a fresh kill, everywhere wore him down. In the past 3 days, he had to learn how to find places to sleep once the sun began to set. set up his sleeping bag, and leave either ballista or mountain to keep watch. His pride, his knowledge died, and his goal to compete with Isolde wavered. However, on this third day, he was once again moving through the desert, his skin dull with yellow dust, but his eyes remained sharp. "I'm thirsty," he said, and drank from his water bottle, only to watch it finish after 2 gulps. His body craved more, but there was none. He had rationed poorly. Just then, he heard the familiar screeching of raptors, prompting him to tilt to the left. 2 raptors raced down the dune with heavy stomps of their hind legs. They were even bigger than the alpha raptor, with their bodies set ablaze in flames. "Igni raptors." Godfrey yawned, cracking his neck as he activated Echo, and a longsword appeared in his grasp. The touch of cold steel, and the sheen of the blade reflecting the sunlight, made his eyes unleash a bright gleam. Rotating the sword, weighing 50 pounds, he suddenly leaned back and watched with narrowed eyes as a fireball spat from an Igni raptor's mouth blazed right past him, nearly making contact with his clothes. Lightning crackled through his body as his eyes turned golden for a split second before he burst forward, evading other fireballs and unleashing a fierce horizontal sweep, cleanly cutting through the first Igni raptor's plated throat. The other raptor spat flames that consumed the first, intending to consume him too, but he leaped backward with all his might, soaring over 2 meters before his sneakers sank into the sand, rooting him back to the hold of the earth. It leaped toward him. Godfrey swung his sword, opening a huge wound on its chest. It countered with a sweep of its tail, which he replied to with a swift horizontal swing that ate deep into the raptor's tail. It tried vomiting a fireball, but Godfrey's other arm, already covered in a gauntlet, struck its teeth, causing an explosion right within the confines of its mouth. The raptor collapsed, making sounds of pain as Godfrey loomed over it, lifting his longsword high. Just then, the hairs on his skin rose up, forcing him to leap back as something fell from above, crashing into the raptor and swiftly snuffing the life out of it. It was a Polaris student with a proportioned build and blonde hair just like him, but much longer. That felt nice. He crackled, looking at his arms covered in dark crimson scales, heated up like they were made of magma. Godfrey frowned. He looked up at the 3 dark golden vultures. Their feathers, both on their bodies and wings, gleamed under the sun like metal. All 3 of them landed. One had no rider. The one on the left was ridden by a girl with 2 ponytails, and on the middle one sat Lucien, one of the top elites of House Orion. "What's with your face?" Lucien raised an eyebrow. "I was about to kill that beast," Godfrey replied, his fingers tightening around the longsword. "It was my kill." James, the one who killed the Igni raptor, shut his mouth when Lucien interjected. "Oh really?" His eyes narrowed on the gleam of fury in Godfrey's eyes. "Eritrea, I want to see the summon that makes this sophomore so defiant." Eritrea, the girl with 2 ponytails, leaped off the vulture, darting toward Godfrey with a smirk as she launched 2 glowing orange balls at high speed. In response, Godfrey used Echo to summon the entire set of Mountain's armor, cladding himself with thick, heavy armor from head to toe. The balls exploded harmlessly against the cuirass of his armor, and he took a bold step, slapping Eritrea with the blunt part of his sword. "I'll shove that helmet into your skull," James bellowed, leaping and launching a downward punch, his entire arm from his hands to his shoulders, covered in dark scales. Using lightning and fusion, Godfrey moved backward and connected a Spartan kick into James' abdomen the moment he landed. The kick made him curve, but he didn't fall, a sign of his durability. Seeing this, Godfrey went 1 step further, slamming his knee into James' face so hard that his eyes rolled back, and he slumped to the golden sand. Lucien couldn't believe his eyes. Meanwhile, a diagram appeared before Eritrea, who rose with trembling arms and clenched, bleeding teeth. A green toad, its back covered in swollen, glowing orange-red warts, almost like molten blisters ready to burst, appeared. Its eyes were large and bulging, and it had a row of deadly teeth. This was none other than the exploding toad, whose current tier was 5. In less than a blink of an eye, it launched over 20 of the ticking time bombs on its back, and all of them flew toward Godfrey at high speed and greater intensity, twice what he faced before. A golden diagram flared to life, and Mountain, already in blackout, emerged, his oval shield enlarging into the Achilles shield instantly as he defended Godfrey. Lucien and Eritrea couldn't believe their eyes when the explosive fireballs ricocheted beautifully back to the toad, exploding so terribly that Eritrea was quickly teleported away due to the damage. Without delay, Lucien took to the skis on his steel-feathered vulture, which made 2 clones of itself, once more increasing to 3. All three of them launched a rainstorm of steel feathers, sharp enough to cut into boulders. Mountain lifted the Achilles shield upward, shielding Godfrey. The feathers went back up but couldn't pierce through the tough defenses the vulture had. "I'll be up here and you'll be down there. I can do all I want and you can't even touch me," Lucian said coldly. As if infuriated, two massive explosive balls blasted off Mountain's feet, launching the Knight Captain into the sky at hyperspeed. 3 explosive balls launched from the Achilles shield, merging into one large ball before exploding midair, engulfing the vultures before they could fly too far. Lucian swiftly retrieved his summon, allowing himself to fall. When he was almost crashing, large steel wings sprouted from his back and he beat them fast, slowing his crash into a hard but endurable fall into the hot sand. He couldn't believe it. He was a third-year student in one of the most prestigious schools in Manhattan, and a sophomore who had just awakened beat him. The slap made his eyes bloodshot. He rose, about to move, when he noticed another knight with a giant bow aiming an arrow at him, while Mountain stood at Godfrey's other side, his longsword over his shoulder. The aura of both summons made him feel a sense of helplessness. "I'll be taking this." Godfrey took James' backpack and turned to Lucian. "Give me yours." Lucian's face twisted. Just then, a dune a good distance away collapsed as a sandworm, 2 times the size of a coach bus, emerged and sank back into the desert, the earth trembling as it made its way toward him. Lucian took the opportunity to fly, laughing heartily. "Let's see how you outrun that without wings." Hovering far away from the scene was Snow, his arms folded as beautiful butterfly wings protruded from his back, flapping gently. Even midair, he exuded an elegant poise, eyes watching the sandworm close in on Godfrey with a faint curl at the right end of his lips. Seraphina, whose wings shimmered with many colors and countless eyes like those on a peacock's tail, watched from a distance. She had been tailing Snow, only to find herself staring in shock at a sandworm, a creature that any one of the elites would likely avoid. From the size of that thing, she guessed it was probably an adolescent sandworm, which was a 6.3 high-tier beast. Godfrey was doomed. Meanwhile, Godfrey watched the sand give way to the creature, swimming underneath at a fast pace. He definitely couldn't outrun a beast like that. It was the same as a man trying to outswim a great white shark in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Mountain tilted his head, tightening his grip around his Achilles shield and longsword, his crimson-plated armor glowing faintly as though alive. Beside him, Ballista entered Blackout, his form sharper and darker, summoning 10 more bow knights. They came out of swirling golden mists, similar to dungeon gates, a sight that made Snow frown. A summon that can open dungeon gates to bring other beings. And is that a golden gate? Just what is Godfrey summoning out of that wretched soul space of his? Mountain's thick and bulky armor manifested on Godfrey, hiding him within the large golden mass. From within the slit of the helmet, a pair of crimson irises glowed as his gauntleted hand plunged the longsword into the sand. Mountain lifted his shield, and explosive balls, condensed to the size of ping-pong balls, glowing with greater orange and red intensity, like miniature suns sealed in glass, blasted out. Dozens of them spiraled around themselves as they shot toward the quaking sound, and great explosions rang. Several areas blew up, sand and dust rising for dozens of meters into the air, followed by the roar of the sandworm. Lucian's pupils trembled. Since when were Eritrea's bombs so powerful? He could feel the difference from the moment he saw it. The version of explosive balls Mountain created were an upgraded form of Eritrea's summon's innate skill. It was a huge slap that Mountain had taken her innate skill, which she had trained for years, and mastered it in mere minutes. Seraphina sensed the same thing. The sandworm burst out of the sand, revealing the thousands of teeth in its round mouth on its eyeless head. It had some burn marks, but nothing too major. However, the moment it appeared, the bow knights released their arrows. Clad in sleek golden plates and moving in perfect synchronicity, they fired one after the other without halt. All of them moved as one fluidly, like they shared a single soul, the true discipline of an ancient force. One by one, their powerful arrows, each carrying the force of a ballista, slammed into the sandworm. Though they couldn't pierce its armor-plated body due to the difference in tiers, their combined fire made the massive beast reel. The bow knights were always too lower than their summoner, which was Ballista. In Blackout, Ballista had risen to 6, so all 10 of them were 4 elite tiers. With the enhancements of their armor, their arrows could damage a 5 with weak defenses. Though their arrows couldn't pierce through it, the combined force of over 10 knights was enough to not only inflict great pain, but tilt the sandworm off course, making it fall to the side. Ballista, on the other hand, finished charging his trailblazer and released it. The bowstring rang loudly as the arrow streaked forth, piercing through the creature's armor and opening a gaping, bleeding hole. Mountain immediately sent his explosive balls toward that wound, worsening it, while Ballista charged and shot the next. Staring at the constant bombardment, Lucian's eyes widened to the limit. How is this even possible? This is ridiculous, Snow spat, unable to hold his fury. Was this even a summoner and his summon? This was a summoner and his army. Godfrey finally removed his longsword from the sand and began to walk toward the enraged sandworm, which rushed him at a greater pace, despite its increasing wounds and the blood splattering everywhere in large quantities. Clearly this was an adolescent. An adult, despite their greater size, would have been wise enough to flee when in such danger. But this vengeful adolescent wanted nothing more than to swallow Godfrey and his summons, and their remains would forever be buried in the depths of the desert. Seeing Godfrey in thick crimson armor walk toward the gigantic worm, Seraphina had no choice but to draw close to Snow. What is he doing? Why would he put himself in danger when his summons are fighting for him, and from a good distance? Snow glanced at her from the corner of his left eye. He's foolish, he spat. Godfrey broke into a run, and as he did, lightning crackled through his body. It grew in intensity, so much that the moment he leaped, it was as if the lightning became arms holding him midair. His longsword shone under the surge. Godfrey knew his mana was almost finished. This final strike took all that was left. Yet at this moment, all he could think of was cleaving through this beast. And with a downward swing, a great explosion roared. Godfrey slammed into the sand on his knees, his armor vanishing into motes of light as he stared at the sandworm, which no longer had a head. Pieces of it fell here and there. He chuckled, leaning back as he felt Ballista and Mountain forcefully withdrawn to his soul's space. His mana was completely finished. He was exhausted, sweat trickling down his face like never before. Lucian blinked several times, wiping his eyes exaggeratedly before chuckling darkly. He ran out of mana. Only now did he remember that Godfrey had awakened recently, so he hadn't gathered enough. Running out of mana was a strange concept. Many of them had years to gather so much that it could never run out, always replenishing and accumulating through meditation. Your classmate is in danger. He's out of mana, and that sandworm isn't dead. It can't be killed until every segment of its body is destroyed, and that worm has over 60 segments. Won't you help him? Seraphina didn't even finish before Snow coldly replied. And why would I do such a foolish thing? He watched as the headless beast lifted its body. As it slammed into the earth, crushing where Godfrey knelt, golden lightning erupted throughout its body, from all 60 segments that Ballista and Mountain had targeted, roasting every living cell within the worm's body. It vanished along with Godfrey, leaving Snow and Lucian, who were planning to steal the kill, seething. I just didn't see it. Godfrey is a threat, more powerful than I thought. Right now his only weakness is his lack of mana. If we don't make use of this time beating him, Snow clenched his teeth, refusing to finish the thought. Once again he had been proved wrong. Even Godfrey himself showcased strength beyond normal. His supposed foolish action obliterated the head of a 24-meter-long beast. On the other hand, Seraphina's heart pounded as she stared at the havoc the battle caused. He still killed it, she muttered, her pink eyes dilating in shock. Back at the camp, Godfrey appeared from motes of violet light. The moment he appeared, one of his classmates roared. I told you Godfrey will be the first amongst those 4 to die, he snickered, turning to the people he made a bet with. Pay up. The earth shook, dust rising as the mighty body of the sandworm appeared. Breaking through the great heap of raptors in Godfrey's kill space and encroaching into the space of others. My God, is that not a sandworm? Lucy, the girl with the iron-clawed crab and Sam's younger sister, took a step back, afraid the beast, still twitching with residual electricity, might suddenly leap and smash her into paste. That's a high-tier beast, someone else exclaimed. The commotion outside made Edwin, who was making a call inside the coach bus, glance out the window. His eyes narrowed when he saw Godfrey and the corpse of the sandworm. A beast he knew very well none of his students, except perhaps Isolde, could kill. Dale had a chance because of the electric power his summon possessed, but aside from him, no one else had such firepower. Due to the difficulty of killing a sandworm, the points gained from it were equivalent to that of a top-level high tier. He's back, Edwin said. Already, Sebastian's disappointed tone rang through the phone. It's only been 3 days. This is usually the period most of them take just to adapt. The kill count normally starts to rise toward the end of the first week. He sighed. It's different for Godfrey, I'm afraid. Edwin shook his head and looked at the tablet showcasing the students' kills, which Julia was holding out for him. Different, how so? 50 low-tier raptors, 20 elite-tier raptors, and 1 high-tier sandworm, which, due to how hard it is to kill, is ranked as a top-level high-tier. A total of 100 points in 3 days, Edwin replied. On the other end of the line, Sebastian's eyes slowly widened. He entwined his fingers, his elbows pressed against the desk. So in a period where he's supposed to be adjusting to being displaced in the harshest terrain, he killed a sandworm and racked up 100 points. I see. Oh, I almost forgot. They also talk, Julia added, which made Edwin's expression sink with a grave premonition. What also talk? He asked quickly, his voice overlapping with the headmaster's, who was still on the phone. His summons, the one with the giant bow, spoke to me, rather angrily, and I think the one with the sword and shield might also be able to speak. Godfrey didn't even react, so they must have spoken before. Edwin felt a chill run down his spine, while Sebastian hummed. Might they be telling him to conquer the world? Edwin's wild claim made Sebastian harumph coldly. Not everyone is Cain. There are rare summons that feed on more than mana, such as Roland Daniel's summon. Cain's summon, on the other hand, yearned for fear, and that's exactly what its weak-minded summoner, twisted by his own creature, brought. Godfrey is different. This is a confident boy who, even without a summon, thought he could survive in this world. He has a strong mind, and he has us to guide him. While this conversation with the school staff continued, Godfrey went to the canteen beneath a wide canopy. He grabbed a bottle of water, emptied it in one go, and splashed the rest across his face. He simply ignored the whispers and stares, sat, ate, and left. Watching him make his way toward the stone formation that curved like a bridge, Julia pursed her lips. He doesn't look happy to be back. She turned to Edwin, who dropped the phone and leaned back in his chair, gazing out the window where he could see Godfrey. He could just go back, Julia said. It wasn't as if he had failed a test, though it would take a while to return to wherever had taken him 3 days to journey. He can't, there isn't an ounce of mana in that boy, he's reached his limit. Edwin shut his eyes. There has to be a consequence to awakening so late. Isolde began to learn meditation at 18 months and became a pro at 4. At that stage she could meditate for several hours. Then there's Snow, who awakened at 9 years, Dale at 11, Cecil at 10. Even the slowest of them had at least a year's head start, and all Godfrey has is barely 2 months. Breathing out slowly, he opened his eyes. By the way, what did the knight say? Several hours later, Edwin moved through the camp. Most students who had chosen to stay were already in their tents. Some were still awake, some asleep, but at least they were under watch. At the Polaris side, things were different. They had a high-tech fence with mercenaries standing guard. Their tents weren't the small kind used here, they resembled houses, each one for a single student. Clearly those students weren't here for hardship, but for sightseeing. Edwin didn't feel much resentment toward them. Most of those children knew their lives would go wherever their parents directed, so why brace danger when there was no need? Their arrogance wasn't born from personal strength, but from wealth. The few Polaris students still out there clearly intended to become combatants for a guild. Shrugging the thought away, Edwin turned and headed toward the rock formation. He sighed when he found Godfrey still seated cross-legged on the bridge-like stone, basking under the dull moonlight with a troubled expression. Clearly, meditation wasn't going well for him. Your back is hunched, straighten it, push your chest out. A faint smile appeared on Edwin's face as he watched Godfrey adopt his correction. You don't inhale mana, it's not oxygen. It's in the air, abundant like oxygen, but you can't breathe it in. Stop imagining it that way and you'll do fine. He slid his hands into his pockets, glancing around while Godfrey, who had always believed he could breathe mana in, suddenly began to notice it gathering in his muscles, pooling there like sugar stored as fat and some of it transferring into his soul space. Have you noticed you're more attentive to your surroundings? Edwin asked. Yes, Godfrey replied. Edwin nodded. Meditation isn't about looking inward. It's about listening, feeling so the hidden part of you can work. Turning, he began to make his way back to the tents, when Godfrey's grateful voice rang softly. Thank you. Exhaling heavily, Edwin looked up at the sky. When you awakened, what did you see in your soul space? 2 knights. No, just a palace. Godfrey's reply made Edwin's eyes widen to the core. A palace, something inanimate. Then did that palace house the knights? Maybe the headmaster was right, whatever they were seeing might not be the full picture. There could be more. Thanks for watching, please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story, and if have any suggestion to a new novel, or want next part of any series comment down.